I'm really glad that each time when we see each other in these unusual circumstances, I am already used to this, but I have this feeling that when will it be possible to see each other in person? I can't wait when we meet in big halls. Our agenda that I received from the organizers, we already said that we had this introduction that was announced. It has already been said. I will tell you very shortly um, about the documentary of Deutsche Welle, not the content, but the main accents maybe, and I will try to not to just tell you about the documentary, but to put important focus and accent on the issues that are interesting to discuss. And also, we will also talk about the film by Rayhan, which is very impressive, and also the short report by Eka Kevanishvili at Radio Liberty. It is picked out the most interesting facts about this. So I will speak for 15 minutes approximately, then we will ask Ms. Rayhan to talk about her documentary, and then Eka will also talk about her report, and then we'll have a discussion. After Eka will talk for 10 minutes, then we will open floor for the discussion. I would like to ask participants to join our discussion, then we will have the discussion. In order for you to ask questions, I would like for you to be as actively engaged as possible. And I will also ask questions probably because this is a media event. It has the direction of media event, and it is really interesting for me because we are talking about media problem, of course, but also how to report these problems, what is the approach to these problems, what questions should media ask about these problems. This was the most important thing for me, and of course I agreed with great pleasure to moderate the discussion. Documentary by Deutsche Welle. I hope that before you joined us, we had the links for the documentaries, and I hope that you watched it. All three resources that we provided. But even if you haven't watched, it is common that we have this sense, this feeling when we talk about these issues. The first important thing, and especially in Georgia, but not only in Georgia, that the society doesn't understand fully, doesn't realize fully how important this problem is. And this is why this discussion is important for us to see what is happening in Europe in this regard, to see everything with the foreign eyes, with the foreign perspective, what is going on in Georgia, and to see realistically modern life. But I think that most people don't realize how dangerous it can be, what is happening. It can be like superficially. Sometimes we look at it with jokes, with a bit of sense of humor, that it is some kind of just mood of these young people or a phase. But I think that we don't take it seriously enough. And I would like for us to think about this, because I think that this is the main problem, that the society doesn't realize how serious all this is and what is the exact problem. And I would like to mention that how Eka called it modern fascism, and this is the same feeling that I have. And we don't have the answer whether we should be really afraid or not. And until the young man was killed, we didn't realize, and we thought it was something else. And I believe that we still don't realize it completely. I believe that until I will tell about the documentary by Deutsche Welle, I want our participants to think about, and also to Eka and Rayhan and the other participants, how are we supposed to fight with this? What is media supposed to do against it, since we are journalists? But journalists and also US citizens, what is the society supposed to do? What is the part by society? What is the part by the state? How should we raise awareness? And how is everything related to raising awareness? And how are we supposed to do this? Education, when we say we sometimes see only school, is education only school, or does it also entail other important parts? In Europe, for example, they teach in Western world about these issues, but it's not enough to only teach about this. NGOs and the role of the non-governmental organizations. When I was preparing for this discussion, I saw a lot of researches, and of course, because of my profession, I look at these researches anyway, but now especially I looked at them. There are a lot of researches, but are they delivered to the society? Do people know about these researches and their results? And one very important question that, and I will ask these questions also later, the role of the media, we understand maybe to see the problem, to reach people, but also in this digital century, what is a journalist supposed to do in the century of social media? For example, our reporter puts on TV, or people, how are we supposed to deal with the discussions on social media? Who is supposed to answer the questions that are the questions are asked, whether journalists are supposed to express their opinions and answer these questions? Are we supposed to answer these questions, or the society? Where is the society? And why am I saying this is that we know everyone who's working on these issues, and we know everyone who has reports and reportages about this. We can, of course, talk about it, but I can also give you a lot of concrete examples about this. I will talk about the film, not to lag behind the schedule too much. We started a bit late, so I will also take that into consideration and talk a bit longer than we planned according to the schedule. So the society doesn't realize how big the problem is, what is the scale of the problem. We can see this in the documentary of Deutsche Welle. If we think about it, it's not only the Georgian society that doesn't realize this danger that this problem brings with itself. Neo-Nazis and ultra-right groups, doesn't matter what we call them. In Georgia, we are still under the influence of these stereotypes that we have so many churches on this land, and this tolerance, and we have this illusion that we are very tolerant because we have so many religions here, and people have this self-image. So this problem exists in the society, and we can see it in the film by Deutsche Welle, that the main problem is that if we join, for example, the protests by Georgian Martyr, we join a party in Europe, and whether you agree in your heart or not, you might not say it, but you might agree in your heart. And a lot of people agree in their hearts, basically, without saying anything. And there are some people who are really trying to stop themselves to say out loud. I also saw in the documentary that it's not only Georgia's problem, and which is a very serious problem. And I believe that this is a very difficult issue that you can imagine that comes with this issue. I believe that the main part that was really important in the film was that the fear of migration. The populist that is one of the protagonists of the film travels to Brussels. He wants to see the heart of the Europe and look into the heart of the Europe and then change whole Europe. This is his drive. He wants to enter the main team, the main core of the European Union, and to change it completely, to revolutionize it. So what kind of Europe do ultra-right groups want and parties want? So our aspiration in Georgia that we want to become Europe, and we are expecting relief from Europe. So we want to understand, what do these people want? What do they imagine Europe to be? And what do people imagine that agree with these ultra-right parties? This fear of migration, so this character, protagonist, and other people also go from one country to another, and we see problems everywhere that we also have in Georgia. This is a fear of migration, migrants, and they are foreigners, we don't know them. Why do they come here? So these Africans, one says in Africa that they are horrible people, and she's selling knives. It is an amazing scene. She says that the Africans are horrible, Indians are great, but Africans are really horrible, what she says. So these are the stereotypes, and she tries to be nice because she says that Indians are nice. We did a report about Indians. We found a nice family, but what was happening in the comments was that for them to go away to their own country and for them to celebrate their own New Year's. And she likes Indians, but people here don't like Indians very often. They don't like anyone very often. So in Italy, already is with their ultra-right people, and he goes to this district that they have this market, open market, and he makes fun of the people who say yalla yalla there. And for us, it is journalism that it is impressive how the situation is really similar in different countries. In one of the districts in Italy where migrants live, one woman, young woman, says, when we bought this apartment, it was so beautiful. Everybody was singing here. It was a beautiful, beautiful district, and it is horrible now. And I felt really bad because I was raised on Plechanovi district, Armashenebeli district. And this is what people say. It was so great, and these Arabs came and Turks came and they just made everything horrible. That's what people say also in my district. People are the same everywhere, this documentary tells us, and the danger is the same everywhere. So this is the approach that people have, unfortunately. The Hungary, that's the situation in Hungary, and Orban case. We went to Orban now. So how are they closing talk shows on television that touch upon these issues? How they closed the university, and how they were forced to go to Vienna, because this has already reached this extent. When we look at the Georgian March, for example, that and what's happening in Georgia that Rayhan and Eka talked about, it is really interesting that everywhere where they go, they don't want European Union, they don't like European Union, but the financing and the funding that comes from the European Union, they like it. When we make a comparison, for example, the films and TV shows about Georgia, I believe that situation is much worse in some cases. For example, in Deutsche Welle documentary, one of the characters, representative of the ultra-right groups, they say that they don't want to be associated with fascism, with the symbolics of the fascists. And they say that it's horrible. I don't know why they call us fascists and neo-Nazis, because we're not them. I don't want to be called a fascist. The only thing that I want is that I want to fight those criminals that come to my country, to my homeland. So that's what he says, because I am not a fascist, and he doesn't identify with the fascism, or that's what he says. But then I remember the character uh, with Radio Liberty Media reports when one of the people says that this is not German, this is Georgian. And then he says that the swastika is not German, it's Georgian, it's from the Georgian symbolics. But yeah, we know this narrative. And then you asked very well, you said that, do you understand that it will be associated with fascism, these symbols, even if you perceive it as a Georgian symbol, that you will be associated with Nazis and fascism? And the Georgian character, we all know this guy, he says, no problem, no problem at all. So in Europe, at least, this man has this sense that it is a problem to be associated with fascism, but together with you, we can tell what are the goals. But here in Georgia, this guy is proud that he doesn't believe that this is a problem to be associated with fascism. So I believe that this is something, food for thought, and I believe these parallels are something to think about. The values, how are they changing? And I believe that we talked about, we heard a lot about this, the European values and the play of words, game of words with the European values. And this is the main thing, that they are angry with these migrants, and the climate change also comes up. And I'm also interested how is it discussed in Georgia, the climate change issues. So very shortly, I don't have so much time. I can talk a lot about this. In France also, Marine Le Pen also talks about with this very young man and these meetings and polished everything, these discussions that have the same contents, the same core that our Georgian March has. So we are together, the brothers. That's what in Georgia, that's the mood that Georgians have, but this is just delivered in different ways. So in, one of the supporters of Salvini, he says that it's the one of the characters says, the supporters, that it's the politicians' business to talk, but Salvini talks like people, and people understand him better. So what are we supposed to do? I will repeat the general questions, and then maybe Eka and Rayhan can also discuss all this. What to do, how to fight with this movement in Georgia or everywhere, what is media supposed to do, whether it is well represented in Georgia or enough, whether it is shown in media enough, what are the reactions of the society, what are we supposed to do in social media, what are the reflections of the society, who is supposed to get into the discussion, whether journalists are supposed to get into the discussions. I will tell you what coverage of these issues brings, what are the approaches, and I will tell you also about my experience after Rayhan and Eka, how we do the coverage of these issues, and when we first had to deal with put Georgian March on live, and what we found as a solution in Radio Liberty. I will tell you about this also. I will share with you. and the role of the non-governmental organizations, and how are we supposed to bring these issues to the society, how to raise their awareness, what is the role of the states, schools, raising awareness, what does it mean even to raise awareness, because it can be different things for everyone. No matter where you go, then you come back to the education. And in Eka's report, it is said that we are supposed to talk to people. This mother of the killed young men says that it's the most important thing to talk with children and to care about their education. And I somehow also said a bit about what Rayhan and Eka were supposed to do. Sorry about that. I would like to give the word to Rayhan and for her to talk about this very, very interesting film that is filmed about Georgia, and this guy that I talked about is the main character, one of the main characters.
Thank you very much. Oh, fantastic. So I was worried that I was hearing the translation at the same time, but now it's working fine. Thank you, Marina, for your compliments about this film. It was very well received at the time when it was published, and I think it had like over 1 million views on Facebook, which was great for a story from Georgia. The film was made back in 2018, and it was a very busy spring. If you remember, in neighboring Armenia, there was a Velvet Revolution taking place. So we were there for 2 months working. It was a very busy time. And then in May, there was this protest movement here in Georgia over the weekend after the police raided nightclubs. And that story really kind of captured the international audiences. It captured the audiences that our editors always want to attract, the young audiences, the ones who listen to the electronic music, the ones who were reading all the articles about Tbilisi becoming kind of new Berlin and so on. So that's why we decided to look a bit further, deeper into this story and what was driving this young people. Why did they choose to come out and protest in this very unusual form, protest by dancing? But also looking into this protest gave us an opportunity to look into the undercurrent movements at the time in Georgia. And that was the very kind of steady rise of this fringe far-right street movements. And one of those movements was Georgi Chilidze's, what's it called, nationalist movement, I think they're called. I came across Georgi Chilidze before this protest. He was quite active during the May 9th celebrations in Vakia Park. If you remember, that event also was kind of becoming a platform for different groups to come and express their attitude towards this May celebration in Vakia Park. So Chilidze was one of them, with very kind of radical attitude towards the veterans that were celebrating the Victory Day in Vakia Park. But still, his movement is very small and fringe, but they played a role against this liberal youth protest movement. They were challenging one of the activists, Anna Subiliani, who was also featured in our report. And we decided that it would be right to speak to this far-right group. And I met him to agree an interview, and he turned up quite late with one of his colleagues, and he came and he was kind of brandishing his gun. It was an air pistol, but it's very unpleasant and intimidating when you meet in a cafe. And he was kind of showing it and saying, "I'm sorry for being late. I was stopped by the police for having my gun." So later in the report, I described that scene before meeting his group. And I'll get back to that particular episode, but I think somehow the government, maybe the security services, they were following Chelidze, and they warned him not to speak to us. They didn't want him to be featured in the international media, but he really wanted to speak to the BBC. So the following day, he was detained for a day, and the following day he invited us to his house. And you have that scene where he's kind of showing with pride his swastika and the flag, and talking about the ideas. So why did we decide to show Chelidze and the Georgian March? Because I think it was important to show that Georgia, yes, it's a small country, but is a very kind of fertile ground. There was this battle of ideas happening in Georgia between the liberal, pro-Western ideas and movements, and also this kind of reactionary traditionalist movements, which in many cases, as many of you know, are somehow supported and funded by Russia. And at the time, there was also a research done by Transparency International in which they tried to trace back links with Russia between these movements and groups. And I think it's still very much relevant to Georgia, because if you remember last September, the publication by Khodorkovsky's group about the funding of Alliance of Patriots Party. And maybe this is something that we can discuss later with our colleagues and journalists. I'm very curious why it wasn't, there wasn't further kind of reaction to that investigation, and how come members of this party are now the only opposition that is represented in parliament. So also I remember when talking to Sandro Brigadze from the Georgian March, it was important for us to show that in a small country like Georgia, how these groups were feeling so emboldened by the US president, by his ideas and policies, and he was so proudly, he was talking about how their ideas are matching Donald Trump's ideas, and he was so confident that he will get so much support in the next parliamentary elections. But as we know, they didn't get that support because they didn't even pass a 1% threshold. So that film was made 2 years ago, but as I mentioned, I think it's still relevant for Georgia now. And I'm looking forward to kind of continuing this conversation with our audience and with the panelists, and see how the relevance of this topic now, even though we're all sitting in a pandemic. And I wanted to go back to the Chelidze story, and when I mentioned, you know, in the report that he was carrying the air rifle, Chelidze is now in jail. He was jailed a couple of months after the release of this film. You probably all know it was for illegal possession of arms. They were posting videos encouraging people to use firearms. And in his words, he was saying that he wanted to become a history teacher, and he wanted to teach young Georgians how to be a real Georgian warrior, that it was so important to know how to use a firearm. But we've been following his trials, and unfortunately his family, his mother, she was very, very angry with me and with this particular report. And at one of the court hearings, she just expressed that anger to me, and she said, why did you have to say that he was carrying a gun? Well, because he was carrying a gun. So that's that from me for now, but I'm looking forward to your questions and hearing Eka's also experience about covering her story.
Thank you, Rayhan, that you touched upon these very important issues. I believe that what we are supposed to think about when it comes to this film, how a foreigner sees all this, and your perspective, and this link. And you saw this problem realistically that all journalists see now, what the danger was back then, and this link between these pro-Western young people and these ultra-right groups. And you took this as a drive, as a trigger for this documentary and for these young people that are interested in different issues, because sometimes it can be that not everyone is pro-Western maybe, but this attack is already something exaggerated that comes from people that are maybe sometimes just formally pro-Western, which is really surprising that we see this overall perspective that foreigners bring something, this movement that also in Deutsche Welle documentary, we see that people of other colors bring some problems that can harm us. This is the fear that everything these ultra-right groups are based on, and this difference already not deep differences, but even the appearance differences cause these kind of conflicts and issues. And I would like to think also about these issues that Transparency Georgia had this research about the influence of Russia and how they support these groups, and Rayhan has shown also this aspect in her film. So it shouldn't be surprising to talk about this in an occupied country. Thank you so much, Rayhan. I would like to switch to Eka Kevanishvili from Radio Liberty, the journalist of Radio Liberty, and she had a very interesting. This is a show, basically a report that summarizes the whole picture, the big picture that shows that it's not just dangerous, that it already has reached the extent of a murder. How can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you well. I would like to share my observations and experience with you. When I received the letter that this meeting would take place, so where is the limit between the objective coverage and also to encourage the rhetorics of these ultra-right groups? So first of all, I try to answer this question, and I believe that this line border might be really clear, but it is very hard to keep this line, and unless you know the rules. So I believe that the Georgian media started to think about this a short time ago. It might be because this issue is new for us also. And when you said about live reports, and that's how I would like to start my observations. When we had these very simple gadgets, phones, and we started lives as Georgian journalists, everything changed. So this online social media, this became a platform very easily accessible also for these ultra-right groups, and they used them very successfully, Facebook Lives and so on. And these neo-Nazi, neo-fascist, ultra-nationalist groups. Sometimes I get confused with these names. I don't know what to call them, ultra-right nationalist, or there's no one name, because also them who is researching them, they cannot agree on one name. So when they moved from the virtual space to the real space, and they had these aggressive protests, and I don't avoid this word aggressive because as a reporter I had to deal with this. and it was very clear that they were aggressive protests. And even if you look at it today, nowadays, we have not only one group that are less, could be less aggressive, could seem that they have these Georgian flags and crosses, and they have this patriotic visual side. But when we look at the contents, what they talk about, this is a propaganda. They call it nationalism, but this is they talk about homophobia, fascism, and so on. When we look at the content more deeply, so first I had to deal with them in 2018 for the first time. Radio Liberty has always shown, reported these issues, but they were also not really appearing so much on the protests. I remember a few protests, and we talked a lot about it, whether we should give them space in our coverage, or should we cover their interviews or not. And I remember that it was a big issue for us too. The protests that were so open didn't exist so much back then. So I was against this mass of people, aggressive mass of people, for the first time with my phone. And of course, this was very difficult for me. I've been a journalist for for many years by then. I had been already a journalist for many years by then, but I was confused. I was perplexed because I was dealing with aggressive people, and I was live, and it was very hard for me to take a decision. It's a different story when you realize afterwards, and then you can edit the material. But when you're already there, and when you talk, and then you follow their leader, and their leader can just hit your hand or your phone or something, and they always listen. So Georgi Chelidze, Georgian Nationalist Union, that they talked, that their ideas were national, patriotic, and we were just repeating what they were saying. But soon their narrative has changed a lot, and also in live already I realized that this was xenophobic, homophobic, and everything was in live. In that moment, I don't know, when you have on TV, when you have a live on TV, they have producers. At least I was completely alone. So I try to think about, what am I doing right now? I was sometimes gaining a bit of distance and commenting on that to neutralize, for everything not to get on live. I couldn't completely ignore, because when I was looking at the screen, that radio, a lot of people were watching the live of Radio Liberty, and it had never happened. So I knew that this was something unusual. And I also realized that these ideas of the Georgian, being a Georgian and national, hidden under these ideas, they might have a lot of supporters, and people might come there, and these two protests can clash. So, and fortunately, there was police between them, and they didn't clash. But the narrative that they had were shown on a lot of media reporters. So we, of course, argued also in radio about this. But even if nobody else had told me, my inside voice, little Eka, was also asking me whether this was right or wrong. I watched this live report, and I realized seemingly I had a lot of experience, but I knew that I made a mistake. And then I tried to make it better, because there were a lot of protests after that. The journalists, what a journalist is supposed to say is that she doesn't, or he doesn't, agree with the statements, or try to put the competent comments, add the competent comments, and calls names and says what these ideas are. And I believe that you're supposed to be prepared for this. And for me, this was my first experience, and I believe that it was a bit too much that was shown, unfortunately, on live. And I believe that this is the right approach normally. So I started to research who these people were and how Georgi Chelidze was arrested, as Rayhan said. 14 lawyers, attorneys were protecting him. I talked to all 14 of them and I asked, why are you protecting him? And they said that they were protecting a patriotic person that had national ideas. But then when I asked, isn't this a fascist symbolic and statements? What are you telling me about this? And all 14 of them told me that this was patriotism and nationalism. So after that, very soon, Vitaly Saparov was killed, a 25-year-old man. And when we talked about this, where we tried to talk about this as a as a idea of modern fascism, this report was made in 2 months. I don't know, because it was about a murder, we couldn't talk about these people that were part of these movements. I don't know why, because, well, actually I know why, because it was about a murder and nobody wanted to talk about this. So we tried to have it, to give it a character of more educational, raising awareness. This was the main idea of the report. So this was very precedental, because this was the first case when a person was called based on this hate and xenophobia, and unfortunately the court didn't consider it as such, the motive, but I received a lot of threats after this on social media or other channels that were threatening us and insulting us, of course. And what you said, Marina, they were saying that we don't have any relation to fascism, despite what was shown on the report. And I realized that that was actually just the beginning of what is happening under the surface. And this is what I saw at the court hearings of Saparov. I don't have the video material. I was reporting it very detailed, but if you look at them, I believe that this was one of the hardest experience for me, heaviest experiences for me. And I knew that I am not supposed to report these hearings as they are shown, as they are reported and covered on Georgian media. I stayed and heard everything, listened to everything, and I realized what is actually happening. I covered everything on the level of conversations, dialogues, and witnesses and the attorneys, the words of the attorneys. I was really amazed by what they were saying. I was perplexed, and I tried to research what moves these groups and why is the government saying nothing about this. And I believe because these people have a lot of supporters under the umbrella of nationalism, and just government doesn't want to lose these people that are the supporters, or they just don't take it seriously enough. And also in Saparov case, and the research organizations started to investigate. They also saw the Russian traces, but I don't know how much it reached the society. These groups exist on Facebook. They still have lives on Facebook, and if you see what the comments are and how much excitement comes from people, you will see and you will be convinced that these ideas that are, as again, under the umbrella of pseudo patriotism, the murders of Saparov, it is a great example, his case, that we can find the people on the photos of the Georgian march that killed him. So this is dangerous, that these kind of hidden ideas, covered ideas, and when we talk about the role of media, I would like to say that media shouldn't stand on the side of hate, and also and the state also shouldn't be on the side of hate. Thank you so much. I also believe that media shouldn't be on the side of hate, and it is media's task to say everything that is happening in the society, and what people might not see, media should see and tell everyone this is what is happening in the society. But I don't believe that it is enough. We should also ask critical questions. At some point, I was thinking, should we ignore them completely? But when they are active, of course, it is better to evaluate them and then we ask critical questions. I believe this is what the right coverage would be. And the right coverage is also a different issue, and we can have a lot of discussions about this, of course, because it is full of new challenges. Right coverage is different, but as you said, the standards, the journalism standards, and our function is to know and to show what is happening in the society. And of course, that we are not supposed to be on the side of hate is also important. But when you don't talk and when you're silent, you are basically participating in that. So we agree that Georgian society doesn't fully evaluate, doesn't fully realize, or they don't want to see it. And this is about society. But of course, state has different reasons, and I agree with you about what you said, but also society is supposed to pressure the government, maybe. So the main problem remains the society that either doesn't see but agrees in their hearts, or they prefer, like it's too complicated and they prefer to ignore it completely and pretend it doesn't exist. Sometimes they are afraid because there's some fear for these symbols. We don't think, of course, that it is coincidental that they show these symbols. They also try to scare people. I would like to say about fear. I was afraid also when I was reporting Saparov court hearings. I was afraid because they knew that I was reporting it in this way, right? So everyone who was reporting and covering this, they had this feeling that it was dangerous, and we know how they act in the whole world, and we still don't know the full extent of it, and we don't know whether you're protected or not, whether you're safe or not. And when they threaten you and when they insult you, so then of course the fear increases, and then you realize where the society is. So this is a different issue, how it should be covered, how it should be reported. This was the main issue. And how are we supposed to cover all this? And I'm really glad that you touched upon this issue. And I would like to add one episode, one scene, when we were talking about the Georgian march after 2018, and we know that there's supposed to be this march going on tomorrow, the next day. And I'm telling Georgi, go and go, be prepared, do this, do this, do that. And we agreed. And then I'm alone, everybody went home, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm sorry to share this, like my personal experience, but I think it might be important because it was also a very important experience for you. It seems like everything is okay. I organized everything, but I realized that this is live, and tomorrow we will show this live, and I will show this hate and horrible news. We will show on live, and I believe that this wasn't enough to just show, because this was a huge wave of hate, and it was such a huge wave of hate because only journalist comments couldn't really outweigh. So I couldn't sleep all night because I was worried what we were about to show and how to cover. And I'm giving them platform. And in the morning, I had an epiphany, and I knew that I was supposed to call someone who was human rights activist and to tell, to comment in a parallel regime, not only a journalist, but I knew that the society didn't really realize whether this was an expert, didn't realize that it was an expert, and of course they insulted the radio liberty because they thought that it was a journalist. But we're not surprised by these insults, and we are unfortunately used to it. But the bigger problem is that Eka mentioned this danger, this fear that we have, because yeah, you just take this risk actually. So this part, one part is also danger and fear that comes with the reporting. And the last thing from Eka's media report, how she uses how she shows how she shows the attorneys of and the quotes of the Gelidus attorneys, because he's so cute and because he loves his homeland, and that's why they were protecting him, and at least they were his attorneys. But a lot of people who watched this report, they were saying in their heart, yes, they love him, and how these journalists are against this young person who loves his country and is protecting the values. And we know that when I'm fighting, he understands that he's not supposed to be anti-Western, but they say, we don't want this West and we don't want this Russia, and I am protecting Georgia. And this is what we're supposed to be afraid of. And thank you so much to both of our speakers. It was fantastic. I know that we are already receiving questions, and so questions in Q&As. We don't have questions in our Q&A session, but I know that we have some questions, and Nina Samkharadze will read them. And I think that it was very important that Eka touched upon this coverage issues. We had public discussions about this issue before, and this is the logical continuation. That was only about coverage, and we based our discussion on that, and journalists are blamed for encouraging these groups and popularize their narratives, and that their reach increases. And you touched upon these issues and problems, but I also believe that there are circumstances when you have to show what they're saying, and the most important thing is how to follow the standards. But also the goal of our project is non-liberal. What do you think that these anti-liberal narratives, okay, they love Georgia, they're patriots, that's how they see it and that's how they package it, but what are their worries? Is this like socially motivated? Is this, what is their problem, and why do they end up with these anti-liberal ideas? And also Deutsche Welle documentary, based on the documentary of the Deutsche Welle, for Rayhan to tell us in parallel about parallels of our ultra-right groups and their ultra-right groups. It's more focused, the Deutsche Welle documentary is more focused on the parties, but it's also interesting because they ask ordinary people on the streets, and they say that they have enough rights, the migrants, and there are a lot of, they are a lot, and they don't need any more protection. Their rights don't need any more protection. In Georgia, there are not as many foreigners, for example, as there are in Belgium or in concrete cities in Europe. So what is the what are the similarities among these similarities, or is this Georgian, is this something very unique to Georgia? To continue, if you paid attention to this, I try to draw parallels between the Deutsche Welle documentary, the direct parallels, and our situation. I will answer as a journalist and not as a... Yes, the parallels are very accurate. And I believe that this is very important and interesting, that they are very similar, the answers of people, responses of people. And I believe that this is a lot more aggressive here and a lot more serious. And this narrative that it was so nice, this district, and how horrible Soros is, and he brought migrants, and these Soros people are supposed to be expelled from the country, and also here Soros is something devil. So this is identical. Thank you for asking. Yes, this is what is really interesting for us, these parallels. And I would like to ask you also to ask if we have questions, but if we don't have, to maybe bring the... We have some hands raised. Yes, we can hear you. Two people have their hands raised. I would like for them to ask questions. Do you hear me, Miss Marina? Okay. Tachi Shanidze and Georgi Gelidze, please ask your questions. Tachi. Hello, you can hear me, right? Yes, we can hear you. First of all, thank you so much for this discussion lately. I have some audio issues. I think now it's better. So I would like to say that lately I attended a lot of webinars like this, and this is one of the most interesting webinars. I couldn't take my eyes and ears off the webinar. So thank you very much for this. My question is a bit different, I guess, takes a different perspective. You were talking about media coverage, which was really interesting. I'm really curious your opinion of someone who knows more about this and touches upon these issues every day. I am curious about the role of the Georgian government, because generally speaking, these ultra-right groups are a great tool, a great instrument of Russian power. And I believe that the Georgian government is supposed to have more responsibility. And then also media also has responsibility. But I think first state has a responsibility. So what is your evaluation? To what extent does the Georgian government realize this danger that exists? And how do they approach this issue? So I'm curious to hear your opinion. Thank you very much, Tachi. First of all, thank you for the compliment about this discussion. It's about everyone that participates in this discussion. Eka mentioned this problem, and also in my initial introduction, it was also mentioned, where's the role of the government, where's their contribution? And we can also talk about many responsibilities. But first of all, I agree with you. Starting from these groups, ever since these groups exist, and for example, the safety of Eka Kevanishvili, I think that the responsibility still lies with the state. First of all, my answer to this question is that after Saparov story, the main reportage that we had was I went to the parliament and I was asking everyone, to the politicians, whether they knew about this case. Irakli Kobakhidze was the head of the parliament, and then I started with him and I continued with the ordinary parliament members. And we asked a lot of people. If you see it in the archive Radio Liberty, you will see that many people just didn't know about this case, maybe one or two people. And when I asked them, don't you believe that these groups are dangerous? One member of parliament said that Why are we supposed to talk about these little parties that don't matter at all? And but I believe that exactly from a sparkle is where the fire starts. So they didn't know that these court hearings were taking place, and I believe this is the answer. How that they don't take it seriously at all, unfortunately. Thank you. Thank you very much for the answer. Thank you, Dachi, for this participation and for your engagement. I would like to add also, I agree with you completely, Eka. I see that there's no reaction from the state, but part of them knows very well, but there's no willingness for this issue to be a priority, for this issue to be discussed extensively. And then we go back to media, because media and society and the accent, what when there's an issue discussed by media and society, then the politicians also have to answer and have to react to that. One more question. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. Hello, I'm Georgi Kevanishvili. I'm from Korean News, journalist and leader school. I would like to thank you for inviting me. I don't attend such webinars so much, but whenever I see them, I pay attention. I'm really glad that these issues are being discussed. I'm a journalist with 18 years experience about ultra-right groups and modern fascism. I don't have so much experience in that, but lately I would like to mention one fact. There was a religious clash between Muslims and Orthodox groups, and I saw such young people, and I saw them only on TV before, but I have never seen. I saw these radical ultra-rights in Batumi, Tbilisi, and in big cities, but I was surprised to see them in this suburb, in these rural areas. We are lions, that's what they were saying. Let's move forward. This was very often said, these lions. And I read again I did some internet research about these lions and what did it mean, this symbol lion. And when I took a video when an old man asks these protesters, they came from Batumi, and I saw these people for the first time. And this old man, this grandpa, is asking not to go to Avi Center because that's where the Orthodox were, and they were asking, please don't go there because a clash can happen. But despite this, we have, unfortunately, if we shout, if we have a conflict with someone who doesn't agree with us, we are really strong in this case, right? So then I remembered when I saw this meeting planned. I don't speak English, unfortunately, and I couldn't watch BBC and Deutsche Welle films, but I watched Eka's report. And Bianca was a transgender person in Korea, and I remembered when I had an interview with her. We were afraid, my colleague was afraid, because for regional media, we have some experience, but we don't have so many experiences in regions, because it is not nice, of course, to see these clashes, but the journalists should be should be prepared to give information to the society for the report not to cause even more conflict. So when I was showing from Mukhtavi these lives, I also had these feelings for me not to cause something even more dangerous. And I didn't agree with the words that I was showing, but I was a bit confused, and I wanted to distance myself from them, but I didn't know what I was supposed to do in life. I couldn't stop it, but I was realizing that maybe what this person was saying, it could cause even more. And Georgi Chelidze and Korkotashvili and these groups, the film and then we danced this film. There was a lot of protest also then, and what was really insulting was lies and this kind of bragging. And so this kind of bragging that the people were just fighting for nothing, that they said that they had seen the movie when it was premiered then, and they were the LGBT rights defenders hadn't even seen the movie. They were saying that we have seen it and it will make people gay and they will take our Georgian roots from us and we will not exist anymore. And what is of course, what I believe should move us is a lot of love and to help our citizens. I think that I don't want to take somebody else's time, but I would like to end with Bianca's story. When her family also didn't help her, and basically even her mom abandoned her, and the grandmother was the only one who helped her. Of course, we shouldn't have sacrificed this person. We shouldn't have killed this person. Nobody knows until now whether she was killed or somebody strangled her. So we are supposed to have our human functions, and I believe that journalists are supposed to be the ambassadors of this humanity, because our every word has a lot of power, and when we don't have experience, and for example, we don't have experience and we're supposed to show the protests by Georgi Chelidze, let's say. I know that there are a lot of people, and for example, Marina, Vashakmadze, I know that my other colleagues, Eka Kevanishvili, also call for 5 minutes these people and ask for their experience, because it will not be too much. I'm sorry, I was a bit too emotional maybe, but I believe that these are subjects that we show them, and we are supposed to have this responsibility, and this is our profession. We are supposed to show them, and our audience, if somebody realizes that this will be, if we give this impression to people that this is hate, I think that it will be a great achievement. Thank you so much, Georgi. I believe that our meeting was great, is still great, because everybody is very honest, and we all have this problem, and we still don't realize what exactly are we supposed to do. Thank you for mentioning Bianca. It is still not fully investigated, and nobody knows what caused her death, but we know that hate is the reason. We don't know how exactly, but we know that hate played an important role. Thank you so much, Georgi. Thank you for, let's go when the COVID will leave us. Let's go more to the regions and maybe do some trainings, or maybe not, cause maybe not call that training. Everything is called the training lately, but let's go and talk about these issues with our colleagues. We have stayed many nights up without sleep because we were also not really sure how to do all this. So I think that practice brings everything, and it is very important that everybody knows each other in region and in the regional media. And for example, report showing Bianca, and I believe that aggression is even more in the regions, unfortunately. And I will answer to Georgi. Well done. That I love this attitude that you should think that to cause even more aggression and more hate. But on the other hand, it is important that you show, because then nobody will know. I cannot forget this clash in Guria and in Achara clash, the face of a woman, when a woman was saying that they have nailed this pig to a door of a person, and she was so proud that yes, we nailed a piglet onto the door. So what Salome said, what they don't like, my answer to that is that what are they afraid of? Who is afraid of feminism, for example? This is the same. This is a fear of something different, of different religion, different sexual orientation. This is a fear, and they don't realize this, that these traditions were to be taken. Maybe Rayhan should comment about this. What do you think moves them to anti-liberalism?
I would like to thank Georgi for bringing up the protest outside Amirani cinema, because I actually wanted to bring that example up. It was another kind of bright example of how the far-right groups were showing to the society that they can easily disrupt important events. But at the same time, I think it showed that, you know, despite all the noise that they created and the Levan Vasadze group and so on, the actual protest actually, it wasn't that big. They were making a lot of noise, but it was just several hundred angry men for different reasons. What I think the point that I want to make is there is a certain, you know, when we ask a question, do we give these far-right groups an oxygen of publicity? Because that's what they want. They want media to cover the events, because then their ideas are kind of become more widespread. We have this certain interdependency with these far-right groups. We, as the media, we try to be balanced. We try to give, we try to be fair and show different sides of the issue or the argument. But I think the challenge and the most important thing for us as journalists is to really ask them hard questions. And it is difficult to do, because in most of the cases, they are incredibly aggressive. And going back to that protest, I remember I was covering it, and there was a journalist who used to be a presenter on Rustavi Ori. She's no longer doing any journalistic activity, but she had a familiar face. And those men, they were just insulting her. It was just horrible to watch. She couldn't do anything. She just backed off. But it was very unpleasant to watch. I think despite this aggressiveness, our tool, as always, our best friend is the facts. We have to be able to ask them tough questions, even if it's very uncomfortable, like it was uncomfortable for me when I was watching Chelidze showing his swastika. It was incredibly uncomfortable, but we have to ask these tough questions. And I've seen there was another question about how now after pandemic, what's happening to these far-right groups. Of course, we entered the time of quiet, they're not as active, but I'm absolutely sure that they will resurface again when people get back to the streets, when protests presumably will resume over the political issues, over the parliament and so on, maybe demands for early elections. These groups, I don't think they're wasting their time. They're thinking how to move forward, and they will resurface. So this kind of interdependency and relationship between the media and the ultra-right, far-right groups, it will continue. But yes, so we have to be prepared, and yes, maybe go to the regions, help other journalists, understand how to cover these uneasy but very relevant topics.
Thank you so much, Rayhan. Salome, I believe that we are already on the limit of our schedule. I didn't want to interrupt you. We have 4 questions and we have approximately 10 more minutes. Whoever will be able. First of all, Nino Samkharadze to read 2 written questions, and then Georgi Marjanishvili and Merab Tsava to ask their questions as well. Which of you would you like to answer? So first question was what is happening in the pandemic? And the second question, whether you believe that the government's responsibility is to educate and the response from the side. Since we don't have so much time, let's let everyone to ask their questions, to collect them, and then to answer all of them together. Georgi Marjanishvili, please. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for this great discussion. Vitaly Saparov was our colleague, representative of our organization, and I'm from the organization that he also worked at, so we were colleagues. I would like to ask questions about, like I like that she told us how she asked the information to parliament members, whether they had information. And our organization also tried to have this flash mob kind of thing. We asked, we sent a letter to all members of the parliament, and this was a question: do you know why I was killed? And it was like signed by Vitaly Saparov. No member of the parliament answered to us. I think one member of the parliament called me and told me a lot of people die, so why am I supposed to know why everyone dies? So I also sent a letter to the president of Georgia, and also from there an absurd letter was that we received, which said that the president of Georgia doesn't have right to get involved in court hearings and to evaluate the situation. So the first goal of this flash mob and the campaign was to understand whether these members of parliament know about this issue and why young people die in Georgia. And unfortunately, none of them from the previous parliament, we didn't receive any tangible answer on this. None of them even told us that, yes, we understood in the media, or it was on a very low level, and they were not even interested in this, unfortunately. This was all from me. Thank you so much for this discussion, and I would also like to express my opinion that I believe all this should be covered, this kind of narratives, and it should be underlined very clearly, the difference between the evil and kindness. And of course, a person makes decision independently afterwards, but it's my personal opinion, and I believe that my colleagues would agree with me that it should be covered for sure, this kind of narratives, but with commentary. Thank you so much. Thank you, Georgi. Merab Tanawa also, please. Hello. Hello. Thank you, first of all, for this great discussion. And I believe that these issues are very interesting. I believe that Ms. Marina and Ms. Ekal already answered my questions, but I would like to add media, if media works better in regions, I believe that this is very important. It's better this way because, first of all, I'm a journalist in Martvili region in my village. There are no groups, but there are people who have radical opinions, a lot of them, that support Georgian March, these Orthodox parents, and many groups that have radical approaches, and they talk a lot about these issues, and they don't know these things, what they convince everybody so easily, people who are not well informed. And there's this conflict that is more hidden also there. The media doesn't cover this. I believe that the accent should also be put on regions and to pay attention to the regions. And the complete ignore is not the right attitude, I think. And what is important is that media is more active in the regions. Thank you. You answered all the questions that I had before. Thank you, Merab. Georgi, Merab, to both of you. We have two more questions that we collected, so let's answer all of them together. Rayhan, maybe you could start, and maybe then Eka, and then I will summarize if there will be anything to add. And that is how we will end our great, very important discussion. I will tell more compliments to the Institute of Politics. Georgian Institute of Politics, thank you again. So, Rayhan, could you please start?
I will, yeah, I'll try to be brief. I want to thank Merab. I think it's important for us. You say that media should be there. Of course, I represent the international media, not, but we're also very much dependent on journalists like yourself for reporting stories through social media, making them known to a wider audience. Also, those groups that you're mentioning, Orthodox parents and so on, and like I would like to combine my answer also to answer Robin's question about what's happening with these far-right groups during the pandemic. I think the continuation of this problem are the widespread conspiracy theories and disinformation, which is very, you know, all these groups are actively engaged in spreading these conspiracy theories. I think what's relevant now to talk about, you know, I've seen the latest poll by NDI talking about 40%, something like 40% of Georgian population, they don't want to be vaccinated. So it's all kind of, it's the links in the same chain, I believe. And I think it's important, really, really important to address for me personally, like this is the story that I would like to work on now. I'd like to look at the conspiracy theories that are being spread among the Georgian population by these groups. And I believe that it is kind of the continuation of those hate ideas that are spread by the far-right groups. So we can't relax, even though we're all sitting at home and there's a lockdown, we can't really relax because those groups are active and they're spreading their ideas. So we also have to be actively debunking these myths that are being spread. Thank you.
I would like to add that it is enough to just exit our bubble, to go out of bubble mentally, at least this time in this pandemic. The pandemic cannot stop something like this. One observation I would like to say is that there were a lot of small groups on Facebook that were propagating this narrative. Some of them have been cancelled, but I believe that some groups have been some united under a bigger under one umbrella, under one name. I believe that this groups are trying, I don't know how much this is a right word, but they try to be more respectable, like more presentable, so to say. they're the same people but more presentable. What Deutsche Welle also showed, they try to speak the languages, and they know that, at least they know that the swastika is bad, in difference to Rayhan's Jelidze. They will also learn that they're not supposed to be associated with fascism so directly, and they will become even more dangerous. So as Merab and Georgi also mentioned, in regions, they can influence so much more easily, unfortunately, on the people who live there, and they can achieve this very easily, and probably we will have consequences after some time. And whoever is interested in this and observing these issues, I believe that they would agree. Thank you so much, Eka. I am trying to answer all of the question. Also, during the pandemic, I would like to add, on Facebook, we see that observe what's happening on social media, and we see what comments are posted and how they're preparing for the times when they will exit our homes. And they are trying to also use this corona as also one of the arguments that these foreigners brought corona and stuff like that. So I would like to thank Keta also, and I would like to also say that the question whether this is role of the media and state to educate people and educate people, media, it is not the role of media to educate people. The role of the media is to bring the news to people and to cover the news. And yes, this is the role of the state and the education system to, this is why I mentioned the quote of the mother from Eka's report. Doesn't matter what we touch upon, the journalists, doesn't matter what we talk about, we still go back to the issue of education, because this was something to be cared about when the personality was developing. And of course, this is policy, education and education policy, and this is the responsibility of state, of course. We journalists are used to taking all the responsibility on us, but yes, of course, the state is responsible also. And I would like to end also with regions. Yes, in regions, the situation is unfortunately very intense. And thank you for your honesty that you're thinking all the time how to cover all these issues. And thank you for, I would like to thank Rayhan also showing the great example of how to cover it, and for us to give, for you to give us this information that is needed. And for Eka and Rayhan, both of you are special in this way. And thank you. I believe that in regions, this is where the ideas are born sometimes. And the I would like to thank you for the regional, I would like to thank regional media that you are also thinking about this. I would like to thank everybody. This is how my function ends here. Thank you. I would like to give floor to Salome. This time has passed without me noticing. Thank you so much. And thank you, Miss Marina, for this amazing moderation. Miss Eka, Miss Rayhan, thank you so much. This discussion was very important, not only for the journalists, but also for the, not only for public also, but also for us who's researching this. We have more ideas for research, and I hope that we will continue our collaboration and we will have more discussions. We also plan to have 2 discussion cycles to organize them in frame of the same project. And then at the end to have a summarizing conference. We will, of course, inform you. And in this week, we will have also expert commentary that will touch upon 2020 parliamentary elections and the radical and conservative groups and their results. Of course, depends on how you believe that they're legitimized and whether the results of the elections are accurate, but independent from that. And you can also read that. We will share via email. Thank you so much again. See you soon. Thank you, Salome, too. You're welcome. Thank you.